The intensified terror attacks on the Syrian capital, however, did not receive much condemnation from the UN. Its General Assembly is meeting in New York this week. Instead, it calls for a regime change that have grown louder, with U.S. President Barack Obama setting the mood by reiterating his commitment to forcing Bashar al-Assad to go. In turn, Qatar, one of the states believed to be supplying the Syrian rebels with weapons, called on Arab nations to intervene in Syria, bypassing the world body. RT's Marina Portnaya has been following the hot issue being addressed in New York now.
Every world leader or high figure that took to the podium at the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday did address the crisis in Syria. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon described the war in Syria as a regional calamity with global ramifications. He urged the international community to act quickly with consensus before, he says, the crisis spirals out of control. Now, some Western leaders took a more aggressive approach with their rhetoric. French President Francois Hollande said that the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad has no future among the international community and called on the UN to immediately provide protections for the Syrian opposition groups that are currently occupying the northern part of the country. U.S. President Barack Obama also released some criticism, additional criticism of Bashar al-Assad, saying that time has come for his government to go. And the U.S. president also said that the international community should support the vision that the Syrians have for the future of their country. Now, we do know that the U.S. and its Western allies have been pushing for regime change in Syria, have been pushing for sanctions against Syria. Russia is among the countries that believes diplomatic approach taken to the crisis in Syria, where a dialogue between the government and the opposition has to be created. The United Nations is still divided over how to resolve the problem in Syria.
Marina Portnaya reporting there. Well, Russia reaffirmed its commitment to peace efforts in Syria as Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met UN Special Envoy Lakhdar Brahimi on the sidelines of the gathering and promised full support for his mission. And commenting on the Western proposals on Syria voiced at the UN, Dr. Khan Hallinan from Foreign Policy in Focus said it's the persistent call for regime change that brought the situation to a stalemate in the first place.
You can't call for the replacement of a regime and then expect to have a diplomatic solution. So when President Obama says Assad has to be replaced, well, then who's to do the negotiating? It seemed to me that the solution here was originally basically the one that both Russia and China proposed, which is that you get a ceasefire. You don't talk about regime change at this point. That's part of the negotiation. That's part of the diplomatic process. And I don't see that happening so long as the United States and France and Turkey and the Gulf Cooperation Council, particularly Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are trying to initiate and engineer regime change. So I'm a little discouraged about where it's going to go from here. But if it doesn't have a diplomatic solution, I think the ripples are going to be just disastrous.